I remember that Halloween night like it was yesterday, though I wish I could forget it. The air was crisp, and the leaves rustled underfoot as I stepped out of my friend's Halloween party, the taste of pumpkin spice still lingering on my lips. Little did I know that my seemingly ordinary night was about to take a sinister turn. Just a block from my friend's house, I caught a glimpse of a figure trailing behind me. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the shadows, a figment of my overactive Halloween imagination. But as I crossed under the flickering streetlights, I became increasingly certain that I was being followed. My heart raced, and a cold sweat trickled down my spine. The footsteps behind me were relentless, matching my every move. I dared not look back, fearing what I might see. Instead, I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves and convince myself that it was all in my head. But my intuition told me otherwise. The journey home became an endless labyrinth of dread, and I could hear the heavy breathing of my unseen pursuer. He never uttered a word. He merely lurked. The distance between us seemed to shrink with every step, and my instincts screamed at me to escape. By the time I reached my front door, I was trembling with fear. I fumbled for my keys, frantically trying to unlock the door. As I slipped inside and slammed it shut, I breathed a sigh of relief. Little did I know, he wasn't done with me. From the other side of the door, I heard a soft whisper, so hushed that it could have been a trick of the wind. But I knew better. The stranger's voice sent chills down my spine as he said, "I'll be seeing you, my dear. Happy Halloween." The night was long, filled with restless tossing and turning as I listened for any sign of the stalker outside. My fear had reached its limit, and I picked up the phone, dialing the police. An officer arrived at my doorstep a short time later, but when we went outside to investigate, there was no trace of the mysterious man who had been stalking me all night. The officer assured me that they would increase patrols in the area, but the feeling of unease persisted. The days that followed were tense, each shadow seeming to conceal an unimaginable horror. I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder, unable to shake the feeling that he was still watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. My life became a waking nightmare. As the years passed, the memory of that Halloween night still haunts me. I can't help but wonder who he was, why he chose me, and what his sinister intentions were. To this day, I can't shake the chilling realization that evil can lurk in the most unexpected of places, even on a night as innocent as Halloween. My name is Emily, and I lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood where Halloween was always a festive occasion, except for one man, Mr. Collins. He despised Halloween. He was a gaunt, sullen man who always had a scowl etched upon his face. No one in the neighborhood really knew why he hated Halloween so much. He kept to himself, seldom spoke to anyone, and his only daughter, Lily, had tragically passed away on Halloween night several years ago. Rumors spread that she had died from candy poisoning, and this was the source of his bitter grudge against the holiday. He believed that Halloween was responsible for the loss of his beloved child, and he blamed all the cheerful trick or treaters for her death. On the night of Halloween, our neighborhood was a colorful mosaic of costumes and laughter as children and parents roamed the streets. We, the kids, were oblivious to Mr. Collins' festering hatred. We thought of him as just a cranky old man who despised fun. Little did we know, he had been plotting something sinister. As I walked with my friends, the excitement of the evening was palpable. But as the night unfolded, something peculiar began to happen. The candy we received was strange, and not in a good way. It had a bitter aftertaste, making my friends and me nauseous. We assumed it was just some weird Halloween-themed candy, so we didn't think much of it. However, as the evening wore on, the symptoms grew worse. Kids began to feel dizzy and sick. Panic spread like wildfire through the neighborhood. We rushed back to our homes, unsure of what was happening. It was then that I remembered Mr. Collins and his grudge against Halloween and candy. The realization hit me like a thunderbolt. It was Mr. Collins who had poisoned the candy, seeking revenge for his daughter's death. He had been distributing poison treats to all the unsuspecting children, and it was only when our symptoms intensified that we realized the horror of his plan. My parents called the police, and as they arrived at Mr. Collins' house, they found him standing in his darkened doorway, a sinister smile on his face. He had achieved his revenge, or so he thought. But the police apprehended him, and the evidence was undeniable. In the end, his sinister plot was foiled, but it came at a high cost. Many children in our neighborhood were hospitalized, and the Halloween that was meant to be a night of joy and laughter became a night of nightmares and tears. Mr. Collins was arrested and taken away, and as he was led into the police car, I saw a flicker of madness in his eyes. He had lost his daughter and his sanity, consumed by a bitter vendetta against Halloween. That Halloween night we would never forget, a night when the true horrors of Halloween were revealed, and the man who had tried to poison us all was unmasked as the embodiment of malevolence. Halloween night, 2019, was supposed to be like any other. My friends and I were eager for the usual fun of costumes, candy, and eerie decorations. Little did we know that this Halloween would take us to a place we never could have imagined. We decided to explore a seemingly abandoned neighborhood on the outskirts of town, a place we had heard strange stories about. It was rumored that a bizarre and reclusive family lived there, but we were drawn to the mystery, even though we had no intention of meeting them. As we made our way to the neighborhood, we couldn't help but notice the unsettling atmosphere. The streets were lined with crooked, gnarled trees. The houses were old, dilapidated, and adorned with strange symbols and makeshift scarecrows that seemed to watch our every move. A chill ran down my spine, but my friends and I pushed forward, fueled by the thrill of the unknown. The first sign that something was amiss came when we reached a decrepit two-story house. Its windows were boarded up, and the lawn was overgrown with weeds and thorns. As we approached, we noticed the low, guttural sounds of a song, echoing through the air. The words were incomprehensible. Against our better judgment, we decided to investigate. Peering through a gap in the boards, we saw a dimly lit room filled with strange, unsettling artifacts. Dolls with missing eyes and rusty knives and ancient books with cryptic symbols were scattered around the room. The air was heavy with an acrid smell, and the chant grew louder. Our hearts pounding, we crept around the house, drawn by an overpowering sense of curiosity and dread. In the backyard, we discovered a garden unlike any we had ever seen. Twisted, gnarled vegetables and fruits grew in strange patterns, forming nightmarish faces and shapes. As we moved deeper into the property, we finally saw them. The family. They appeared to be wearing tattered, makeshift costumes, their faces hidden behind masks that seemed to be crafted from animal bones and old rags. They moved in a bizarre, synchronized dance, their chant growing louder and more frenzied. It was as though they were performing some dark ritual. We watched as they raised their arms to the sky, offering bizarre, sacrificial-looking objects to an unseen deity. The family's strange, guttural chant reached a crescendo, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, it stopped. The family turned to face us. Panic surged through us, and we ran as fast as we could. The chant started again, more menacing than ever. We finally made it back to the safety of our own homes, out of breath and haunted by what we had witnessed. We never spoke of that Halloween night again, and we never ventured near that bizarre neighborhood. To this day, I can't forget the unsettling feeling of being watched, or the chilling sight of the family in their macabre costumes. Halloween had taken on a new meaning for us that year, one that still sends a shiver down my spine every time October 31st rolls around. It was Halloween night, and the air was thick with a sense of excitement and eerie anticipation. I had just finished my shift at the local diner and decided to head to a friend's Halloween party. Dressed as a zombie nurse, I couldn't wait to join the fun. Little did I know that this Halloween would be unlike any other I had experienced. The party was in full swing when I arrived. The music was deafening, the decorations were on point, and the guests were all decked out in their spooky best. The dimly lit living room was the epicenter of the celebration, with a large pumpkin-shaped punch bowl on the coffee table, emitting a strange and potent concoction that tasted like a mix of rum and cinnamon. As the night wore on, I noticed a man in the corner of the room who stood out from the rest of the partygoers. He was wearing a plain gray suit, a stark contrast to the colorful and elaborate costumes that surrounded him. He looked completely out of place, but there was something intriguing about him. His eyes were a piercing shade of blue, and his dark hair was neatly combed. He was engrossed in a conversation with a small group of people. His voice low and hypnotic. I couldn't help but be drawn to him. Curiosity got the better of me, and I decided to approach the man. I introduced myself, and he responded with a charming smile. He told me his name was Alexander and that he had just moved to town. He seemed pleasant enough, but there was something off about him that I couldn't quite put my finger on. He was eloquent and well-spoken, but there was an intensity in his gaze that sent shivers down my spine. As we chatted, Alexander asked me about my life, my dreams, and my deepest fears. It was as if he was peeling back the layers of my soul, revealing my most vulnerable secrets. I found myself sharing things I had never told anyone before, and it was both exhilarating and unnerving. I couldn't help but feel a strange connection with him, as though he had a profound understanding of me. As the night progressed, I found myself spending more and more time with Alexander. He had an uncanny ability to make me feel like the most important person in the room. We talked about everything from our favorite books to our most cherished memories. It was as though we had known each other for years, not just a few hours. But as the party started to wind down, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The other guests began to leave, and the room grew colder and darker. Alexander's demeanor shifted, his eyes now filled with a predatory gleam. He leaned in close and whispered in my ear, "I have a proposition for you, something that will change your life forever." My heart raced as he outlined his plan, a sinister and macabre scheme that left me horrified. I realized that Alexander was not who he appeared to be, and I had unwittingly fallen into his trap. Panic set in, and I made a hasty escape from the party, leaving Alexander behind. I ran through the dark streets, my zombie nurse costume trailing behind me. I knew I had narrowly escaped a fate worse than death, but the memory of that Halloween night with the strange man named Alexander would haunt me for the rest of my life. Halloween would never be the same for me again, as the memory of that night served as a chilling reminder of the darkness that could lurk behind the most charming and enigmatic of strangers.